Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it is going great. I have an unexpected weekend off to watch football at home. That news may be greeted with less enthusiasm in other parts of the state of Ohio, but the weekend to sit on the couch and watch football is never a bad thing, if you ask me.
Tom, you might have some people disagreeing with you
Mm.
this week. I don't want to speak for the angry mob at your door, but I think I will. So, yeah, no game to cover, but still games to preview in our weekend preview show. So that's what we're going to do right here. And I figured we would just go with the conference championship games. There is another game out west that we don't necessarily need to talk about, USC and Cal. Tom, I know you're clamoring for it.
Mm.
Please stop. It's unbecoming. It's a little gross, honestly.
I mean, anytime you can reschedule a game with the idea that, well, someone's going to need to get bowl eligible, and then both teams who are scheduled in the game already be eliminated from bowl eligibility in advance of the game. You've got to love it. That is college football at its very best. That is USC and Cal. If anyone's wondering, they're both 4-7. So, nope. See you again next year.
Yes. Yeah, college football at its very best by showcasing some of its very worst. That is a very solid definition of what college football is. So I figured we would talk about the conference championship games that involved ranked teams because there are some, MAC and CUSA that, if that's your thing and it's everybody's thing, but we only have a limited amount of time here. We're going to spend at least 20 minutes talking about Iowa and Michigan, I'm sure. So in order to get to that point, we should probably get started. And for our purposes, Tom, we are going to start Pac-12 championship game between number 10 Oregon and number 17 Utah. Utah is a 3-point favorite in this one. This is a rematch, not necessarily a rematch. It's their second time they've played this season, following Utah's 38-7 demolishing of the Ducks last month, just 10 days ago or so, where Utah came out and just in a very similar fashion to what we saw from Michigan and Ohio State, just kept, just beat them up. And we saw Tavion Thomas. We talked about it after the game, just basically, it's 3rd and 8. What should Utah do? Hand it to Tavion Thomas, 9 yards, first down. That's how they pick up that was their 3rd and long secret. I don't know if that secret works again this time, but 31 points is it's hard to make that up. And not that Utah would again do that, but if somebody beats you by 31 points one time, how do you go about expecting a different outcome in terms of a win and loss? Like, do you think this is a completely separate entity, or that 31-point win came from somewhere? And so that same place is going to produce, 17, 10, 24-point win. I mean, tell me.
Yeah, this is a game where it's no longer a true road game for Oregon, so maybe that helps a little bit. It's no longer at altitude, so maybe that helps a little bit. And you can have games where just things don't go right and your game plan just doesn't work. And so now you've had another week to kind of figure out, okay, what is the counterpunch to what Utah is doing? And you can try something different. So I definitely expect this game to be a lot closer than it was. It would not shock me if this was, Utah, what was it, 38-7 the last time? If this was 27-21 this time or something like that, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Oregon winning wouldn't completely shock me. On our bold prediction show, you actually thought Oregon was maybe going to win because, that is one of the old axioms of college football is it's very hard to beat the same team twice in one season. So, that was quite a lopsided win. And it was pretty recent. It wasn't like, Ohio State, Oregon, where a lot has changed since September.
Mm-hmm.
It was only a week and a half ago. But, now the Oregon staff has had a little bit of time to look at what Utah did, come up with some kind of a counter. And this is a game that they're going to be, both teams are going to be pretty motivated by, because I guess theoretically, Oregon could theoretically maybe get into the college football playoff if a million things happen. They're 3 spots behind Ohio State, so probably not. But you're at least then playing for the Rose Bowl, which that's a pretty good prize. If you've kind of made your piece, especially like Utah. Utah's been out of the National College Football Playoff race since about mid-September. They lost a couple real early games, but they've come on pretty strong. So going to the Rose Bowl, if Kyle Whittingham could get Utah to the Rose Bowl, that would be like one of the biggest things that they've accomplished in program history. So I think there's going to be plenty of motivation for this one on both sides. It should actually be a pretty fun game with some decent stakes, and one that Ohio State fans, as potentially the other Rose Bowl participant, Ohio State fans may want to keep a pretty close eye on.
And I wrote on Wednesday, Ohio State's path to the playoffs. It incorporates this game, and you should want, Buckeye fans should want Utah to win, just so Oregon can't climb and jump Ohio State or get even with Ohio State with a conference championship, which, like, I don't know how outlandish the path that I've laid for Ohio State. It's pretty outlandish. Yes, it requires some things, but it feels like Oregon coming from 10 to 4 would require even more. And I know some people don't think they would jump Ohio State anyway, say Ohio State is 5 or whatever. I'm not so sure. I'm just advising people, don't mess with it. Don't even let it come into play. Go ahead and root for Utah here to win this one. I am a little surprised that the over-under is 58. It was like 59.5 like when I did put this when I was writing down a little rundown for myself earlier today. And both of those seem high to me. And I would think the under seems like a pretty safe play by a considerable amount here. I'm probably going to lay the points, the 2.5 that it is right now, and play the under. I'm not going to, but that's where I would be leaning right now.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like these are two teams that are going to be, neither of these teams are like real fantastic aerial attacks. So there's probably going to be a lot of running, which means there's probably going to be, and there's pretty good defenses on both sides. So you're running the ball, the clock keeps moving, you're playing pretty good defense, you're getting off the field on third down. Like, yeah, I would lean towards the under in Utah here. Because 2.5 points? I mean, that is not a very big spread for a team that just won by 31 points. That is Vegas telling you there is not anything close to a 31-point true talent difference between these two teams. So one to keep an eye on. The longer we talk about this, the more I'm convincing myself that like Oregon is going to do this and beat them. I don't know, I don't think they're going to blow them out, but yeah, the longer we talk, the more it's like, man, it is hard to beat a team twice in 1 year, especially twice in 10 days. So we'll see. That this is one that, a lot of years the Pac-12 championship game is just kind of like whatever. Like you don't need to pay any attention to it. This year, it's like this is actually a pretty intriguing game.
Yeah, and whenever Vegas is like this, like a couple of days ago, I'm like, how is Duke only a 2-point favorite over Ohio State? Are they really? Is this Black Friday for Vegas? They're just giving money away, and no, they were not. In fact, they probably made some money that day. So let's go to everybody's favorite offensive outbursts galore. The Big 12 championship game where their time will not be offensive outbursts galore between number 9 Baylor and number 5 Oklahoma State. Probably maybe the two best defenses in the conference. Oklahoma State favored by 5.5. The over-under of 46.5 is just, for a Big 12 championship game, seems like, what, are people sick? What's wrong? Why is this only a 46.5? And it's because you've got Dave Aranda as head coach at Baylor. He's a defensive guy, and they've got a good defense. And Oklahoma State's got a very good defense, and neither team is really all that great offensively. So this is probably going to be a bit of an ugly affair. This is also a repeat game. Oklahoma State won 24-14 earlier in the season in Stillwater. That game was 17-14 in the final moments of the fourth quarter before Oklahoma State got that second or that additional touchdown, the insurance score there. One of the interesting things from this game, or a couple, Oklahoma State -3 in turnovers, still won by 10. They held Baylor to 280 yards of total offense. They only had 401 for themselves. They held Baylor to, Tom, 10 first downs. This feels like offenses can slump. Defenses generally don't when they're really good. And for me, this feels like it's going to be low scoring, and a 10-point lead could be 21. Like it's Oklahoma State will just keep Baylor at arm's length by, but even what is arm's length? I think Oklahoma State is going to win, and probably I'll say they'll cover, and I would probably go with the under on this one as well.
Yeah, that's a pretty low under for
It is
47. I mean, that's real low. And you just saw Oklahoma State play a game where they played in the 30s with Oklahoma, and there was some special teams kind of wonkiness that added to those numbers a little bit. But last week I had a very early Sunday morning to go coach hockey, so I stayed up for Bedlam until Oklahoma was up by 9 points. And I'm like, well, okay, so now it is safe to go to bed. Spoiler alert, it was not safe to go to bed. So I woke up to some very surprising news on Sunday. But yeah, I feel like it feels like all of these games, we're going to have one exception. We'll get to that in a little bit, but like, it feels like there's going to be like 4 out of the 5 Power 5 conference championship games might be won by teams in the high 20s or low 30s at the most. There's one that is going to be a very fun exception. We'll get to that in prime time, but yeah, it's just, this has been kind of a year where there has not been a lot of great offense. And, is that the rise of defense? Is that just the offenses just have not been great this year? Whichever one it is, it's interesting to me that there's so many good defenses. There's more good defenses than good offenses in these games. And it feels like that's the reverse of what it has been in several previous years.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know if it's good to see, or it's like, I like that about the Big 12. And now you're kind of missing it, but it is good to see some of the top defenses coming from there. So, Tom, let's move to the Mountain West championship game between Utah State and number 19 San Diego State. And I don't have a lot to say about this game. This is not a rematch of any sort this year. They have not played yet. I like Utah State because, as a longtime college fantasy football player, the Aggies have helped me out over the years with some guys that nobody else knew about. And frankly, I didn't know about until like running back Emmett White would rush for 300 yards in a game. And it's like, who's that guy? Nobody knew. He was 5th on the depth chart before the season, and then just comes out and has a great game. And now you've got somebody for a long time. And so I've had some of those guys from Utah State, special place in my heart for the Aggies, but also San Diego State. We grew up in a time where one of the first college football superstars that I remember getting to see a little bit of was Marshall Faulk. And he was, people ever saw him in the NFL at the Rams. I don't know how many people saw him at San Diego State, and he was fun to watch. And they had some great high scoring matchups in the WAC with like BYU and Air Force and things like that, where some old school stuff with some new school players. And that is the extent, Tom, of my preview for the Mountain West Conference championship game, other than Brady Hoke's got a real good shot here.
Yeah, and there's a couple names to know here. I mean, for one, the two coaches are both kind of interesting because they both have had kind of interesting paths to get here. Brady Hoke, who's coaching San Diego State, you probably know his path. You've probably followed his path a little bit. But, after leaving Michigan, he was kind of like a punchline because he just went everywhere and coached 1 year and they had a terrible season and then he got fired, and they went somewhere else and he coached 1 year and they had a terrible year and he got fired. He had come to Michigan from San Diego State. So this is going back to a place where he'd had success before. And the Brady Hoke thing doesn't seem to work very well anywhere else, but man, it works in San Diego just fine. So they've had a weird season. They're playing, they're building, they knocked down their old stadium. They're building a new stadium. So they're playing in Carson, California, like an old soccer stadium. And so it's an hour or something from campus, something like that. And by far the best player on their team is their punter, Matt Araiza. If you've not watched Matt Araiza, treat yourself to Matt Araiza. It is just like 70-yard punts, just constantly. Like, how is that possible? How is this dude breaking the laws of physics? So he's great. On the other side, Blake Anderson, the coach of Utah State. He used to be the coach of Arkansas State. He was there. He was a very successful coach at Arkansas State, stuck around there for quite a while. His wife had a long battle with cancer when she passed away. He, I think, just basically needed a change of scenery, like needed to not be in the same house and in the same place and getting reminded of all that. So he got just a change of scenery out to Utah State, and they've been good. They've been really good this year. They lost a couple of games early to Boise State and BYU, which are understandable. They had a real weird recent loss to Wyoming. They get smoked by Wyoming at home. So it wasn't even the Laramie thing, but they've been good. They will put up points. They had 51 against Hawaii, 48 against San Jose State. They had 49, they had a 49-45 game earlier against Air Force. So they can score. San Diego State wants to run the ball, punt, play field position, beat you 13-10. So this is going to be a good game of contrasts here for sure. But yeah, I think I'm going with San Diego State.
I'm not sure. Is the punter, is he a senior? Is he an underclassman? Would he be a transfer portal candidate to a big time program? Like, he might be pretty bored at Ohio State, but like, imagine what he could do at Michigan.
I think he's a senior. I think he's I'm going to check that right now, but he's both their kicker and their punter. He is a junior. Like, this is going to be the craziest thing I've ever said on this show.
He's go early.
He could go early and go like first or second round. Like, I mean, it is just, if you just want to look at it as like a, baseball stats, like value, wins over replacement, like how much better is he than just like the average dude, the average punter? It's like 5 yards. It's crazy. And that is going to win you a game at some point. He's not nearly as good as a place kicker as he is a punter. But man, like, someone is going to pick him way too early and everyone's going to throw a fit, and then he's going to win someone some games just by being an exceptional punter in the NFL. It is just one of those like really weird college football things that you have to be kind of like the weirdo who stays up watching the 10:30 p.m. late shift games. But you stumble across his games and it's like, I've seen a lot of college football. I have never seen that before.
No, it's like when you compare him to what other people do, it's like a Texas high school pitcher. He throws 106 with control. It's like, you're like 4 miles per hour ahead of anybody else, or 3, it's considerably more. It's different. And, it's 70 yards in the air. Like, this is a guy who, the problem is then, does he outkick the coverage? Does he create issues where, no, we want it higher, not further. We want it higher. And then you're bouncing stuff off of the Jerrytron there in Dallas. So Cowboys can't take him. They can't have him.
He was preseason. What was his preseason ranking in the Mountain West, in the preseason honors for the Mountain West by Athlon Sports?
In terms of what? Like,
in terms of all conference team. Which conference team was he on preseason? Athlon Sports. The punter we're talking about.
Third
team, all Mountain West. College Football News deemed him, quote, San Diego State's 5th best offensive player. Tony, that feels low.
Well, I was going to say 3rd best, 2nd best defensive player as well.
Mm-hmm.
Give that man the Heisman. That's all I'm saying. Tom, let's move to the Sun Belt Championship game in Lafayette, Louisiana, 3:30 p.m. on ESPN, between Appalachian State at 10-2, and now the number 24 Louisiana Lafayette Raging Cajuns. So this is a season for Louisiana they started ranked right around this 23-24. The trendy pick to beat Texas in their opener. That did not happen because, as we know, Texas is back, or Texas was back for a week. They got a ranked win. Louisiana loses that one 38-18, and then people just kind of forget about them. Since then, they have won 11 games. They have lost their coach, Billy Napier, heading to Florida, but he will coach in this game. Says the bowl situation is still a little bit up in the air. If I'm Florida, I'm like, no. You're not dealing with the bowl game. We need you here at the office. You start Monday, and maybe you might even start Sunday. So that's what this one is. There was something that I wanted to address in this one. Oh yes, they have played already this season. Louisiana beat Appalachian State 41-13 in Lafayette, and that's where this game will be again. these conference championship games that are on the home field, I do like, but it's certainly hard for the road team to try and finally get that win. Like this will be an interesting way for the Louisiana players to say goodbye. I think you figure like this is not one of those situations like Notre Dame players are mad at Brian Kelly. I'm sure there's some hurt feelings here that he's leaving, but I think everybody understands,
I think I saw Louisiana's AD at one point, like tweet the tweet from Florida announcing it with, basically good luck, coach. Like it was like, this is very much like we understand like that. We accept that Florida is a better program than we are. Like that's okay. Everyone sort of gets what's going on here. The weird thing, I mean, you mentioned what I was going to hit on, which is they absolutely annihilated App State earlier in the year, which is not something most people usually do. But outside of that game, they've played a ton of close games. You mentioned they lost by 20 to Texas. They barely beat Nichols the following week. FCS Nichols beat them by 3 points. At Georgia State, won by 8 against a team that was fired its coach not that long after that. Won by 2 at South Alabama. And then they came out and just hang a 41-13 whooping on App State. And then right back to 1 point win over Arkansas State and 4 point win over Georgia State and 2 touchdowns over a very bad Troy team. Like this is not a Neil Brown Troy team. This is a bad Troy team this year. 5 point win over ULM, who is, they're better than normal this year, but they're also not very good. So, but then they beat Liberty by 4 touchdowns. They beat Texas State by 45. Like it feels like this is a team that can kind of get up and really whoop your butt. But if they're not up, then they can just kind of cruise. But yeah, it is like the quietest 11-1 season. Because I saw something about Napier this week, obviously with the Florida job, and I saw his record. I'm like, that's not right. They're not 11-1 this year. I remember they lost week 1, and I'm sure they haven't. Oh no, they have won 11 straight games. How about that? So that'll be. I have given up on trying to figure out the Sun Belt. Like App State is really good. This is, anytime you have the coach leaving, it's just kind of like, yeah, this is going to go one of 2 ways. And I have no idea what the emotions inside that locker room are. So, yeah,
just stay away from those games. Another interesting thing about this, the last time they played, it was a 28-point win. The line on this one is Louisiana -3.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so which is essentially a pick 'em. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if the home team in these things get like 90% of the tickets or if they're split. I'm guessing they get as many tickets as they can sell for stuff like this.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think App State's bringing 50,000 fans. So,
well, I think it's a 20,000 seat ish stadium, but at least that was the capacity for the first go round, 20,000. Although Texas, it's probably around 30-some thousand because they've got some over 20,000 this season. Tom, speaking of poor attendance and lack of fans, let's move to the Southeastern Conference Championship game, or as people like to call it, the SEC Conference Championship game, featuring number 1 Georgia, 12-0 on the season, against number 3 Alabama, 11-1 on the season with a very embarrassing loss to Texas A&M. Georgia, a 6.5-point favorite. The over/under here is 50. I've had an NFL guy telling me all year, Georgia. And then as this game is getting closer and closer, he's like, I'm starting to think Alabama. And it's like, how invested are you? Because you really seem like you're a Georgia guy, and now you're starting to get a little bit of puckering going on with it getting a little closer. I want to see Alabama have enough offense for Georgia's defense because they have not had enough. They barely had enough offense for Auburn. Now there's going to be some crazy things that happen in this game. Big plays somehow or other. This is the first real test for Georgia. Who knows how well they're going to handle it. I think regardless of what goes on outside or the big plays down the field, Alabama's offensive line is going to be the story, and it might not be a good story for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, if going into a game, I mean, all the things that Ohio State fans are saying about their offensive line right now after the Michigan game and go, I mean, anytime you even broach the subject of, well, there's theoretically a possibility that Ohio State might have a small chance of getting in the college football playoff. It's like Ohio State fans cannot tell you fast enough how much they don't want to do that because how badly they think it'll go against a team like Georgia with the offensive line. Alabama's offensive line has been just as bad, if not worse, than Ohio State's for a lot of the year. I mean, Ohio State's line for most of the year was pretty good. Alabama's line this year has it has not looked right all season. The running back situation is not great. They've had a couple injuries. Brian Robinson his status is still a little bit up in the air for this weekend. I mean, they had 3 points against Auburn last week until the final minute of the game. I mean, they barely scraped by LSU a couple weeks ago. They had 6 yards rushing against LSU a couple weeks ago. I mean, it is a mess. And you get the sense like Nick Saban, has it been weird to you watching Nick Saban this year in like post game? Like they barely scraped by Auburn and he's like happy after the game. It was like,
we talked about that.
Does he know that he just like this team ain't it? And I think he knows that. And the same way that Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame in the middle of what could theoretically be a college football playoff season tells me that Brian Kelly knows that team cannot win the college football playoff. Nick Saban's demeanor this year tells me like Nick Saban recognizes this is not one of my good teams. I mean, they're 11-1. They're playing for the conference championship. They're on the verge of making the playoff anyway. But this is not a fantastic Alabama team. This is nowhere near last year's Alabama team. So this is another one where it feels like a lot of soft factors are going to be involved. Like Georgia is the better team this year. I think almost unquestionably Georgia is the better team. They're not flawless. I have questions about the offense for sure, but they are the better team this year. Are they going to pucker? Is Kirby going to coach this to win, or is Kirby going to pucker a little bit? Because you've seen that in the past, and Georgia has the history of not winning any the championship since 1980, and they've blown it a bunch of times recently. They've had more talent than a lot of teams that they've lost to recently. So I think I'm picking Georgia here because I think Georgia is the better team by a decent margin this year. But like you never feel good picking against Alabama, and you don't generally feel great picking Kirby Smart because it's like he has found a way to lose some games that you wouldn't, he shouldn't have lost in the past. It's like, man, I have seen them blow this game before, and I'm very nervous picking them and thinking they might blow this game again this year somehow.
Well, a lot of his style just keeps the opponent, a good opponent, in the game. Mm-hmm. You punt, play defense, that sort of thing. The offense is not all that explosive. I think they need to take some swings and not just jabs, like really go after Alabama, set the tone, not unlike what Michigan did to Ohio State, and just challenge them rather than let's just get out of here with a victory. Let's just get out of here with a win. And that's how you end up in a 4-quarter game with, Alabama having the ball and a chance to take the lead with 5 minutes to go. And you're like, maybe this is Milk was a bad choice. Basically, like we should have maybe been a little bit more aggressive throughout the game, because when teams are aggressive against Alabama this year, the results haven't been that bad. So just go after them, see what happens. This is a 6.5 point line. I'm also taking Georgia. I don't know. It's a lot of points. For one, just to pick against Alabama takes a little bit of a leap of faith. I don't know if I want to take such a big leap that I'm going to require a 7-point win in this one to look like I'm right.
Yeah, it feels like you probably need a defensive score from Georgia to get them comfortable, feel good about it at the end, because they're not putting 50 points up this weekend. So can they hold Alabama? Can they beat Alabama 31-20, 28-17, something like that? Even obviously 28-21 would even cover the game, but it just feels like something in that range is about what, if Georgia wins, it's 28-17 kind of thing. And, Bryce Young will make a couple plays, but I don't think they have the ability to run the ball, which means that Georgia's offense is going to be on the field probably a lot, because I don't think Alabama's going to be able to sustain a lot of drives. And ultimately, if Georgia's defense, you don't wear Georgia's defense out, you're not going to be able to run the ball on all Georgia's defense. So, maybe you can hit some big plays. Maybe they hit one or two big ones to Jamison Williams over the top or something like that. But I don't think they're going to be able to do it consistently enough to win this game.
Yeah. Take some shots, see what happens, but you're going to have to protect in order to get those shots down the field. AAC championship game in Cincinnati, number 21 Houston, 11-1 on the season, 8-0 in conference play against number 4 Cincinnati, 12-0 on the season, also 8-0. Bearcats are a 10.5-point favorite. Over under on this one is 53.5. This is going to be a testament to how focused, how calm, how collected the Bearcats can be, because they know if they win, the unthinkable has happened. They have made the playoffs. They are going to be in the playoffs. All they have to do is win. And then as you keep thinking about it, the stakes just keep getting higher, even though the stakes have not changed. But you can kind of multiply it as you talk about it. And then it's like, well, how can they operate with so much on their shoulders? And so that's where Luke Fickell has to come in, and you got to try to find a way to get them to it. We have to win this game. This is it. The only thing that matters is this game. And then if you win the game, then we'll reap the rewards. But you can't start thinking about, I don't think you can start thinking about the cost, because it's so different than any other program has really faced. Like nobody else is, who has been in this position before in the group of 5 to be facing something like this. Central Florida has gotten close, but Cincinnati is in. Now they just have to not screw it up. And they screwed up last year against Georgia. They've screwed up in the past against lesser teams. Houston pretty good on an 11-game win streak right now, but you get it at home. This is going to be the craziest environment that Nippert Stadium has ever seen.
Yeah, it is going to be. I mean, you've got all the stuff you just mentioned, like literally all of that, plus we are recording this on Wednesday evening. We're doing this so as of right now, the Notre Dame gig is still open. Theoretically, you have the Luke Fickell maybe, or Marcus Freeman maybe with Notre Dame. You got that whole thing swirling. As you mentioned, this is like unprecedented. You have seen plenty of group of 5 teams talked about as if they could make the playoff. You had one of those Tom Herman Houston teams where they beat Oklahoma and they beat someone else, Louisville, I think. And it was like, oh, they might do it. And then they blew it against someone really stupid like UConn, maybe Navy. But this is a team that is not only in the conversation like past Boise State teams have been, the UCF team. Like those teams were like, well, if they win out, then maybe. UCF, I think, capped out at about number 6 or so in the college football playoff rankings. As you said, Cincinnati's in. Like, this is it. You win, and you have done literally everything you can. What will the committee do if Oklahoma State has a really impressive win on Saturday against Baylor? That's out of your control. What will the committee do if Alabama beats Georgia, and somehow there's too many Power 5 conference champions plus Georgia, and you get booted out? Like, at that point, you've got a pretty good grievance. But you can say that we did literally everything we could have done, and we were in a position and they just shafted us. Or you can make the playoff, because this feels like the one year where if Cincinnati's in, you can't just say Cincinnati's an auto win for whoever they play, because they're every other team in that bracket outside of Georgia has some significant flaws probably. So if it's Michigan Cincinnati, if it's Oklahoma State Cincinnati, if it's somehow Notre Dame Cincinnati again, like even Alabama Cincinnati, like Alabama has much better players, but they're not perfect this year. This is not an unbeatable Alabama team. This is not the Clemson team that Ohio State had to play a couple of years ago. This is not the LSU team from a couple of years ago. This is not Alabama from last year. Like, they could legitimately make the national championship game this year if they, if things break right and they get the right matchup in the semifinals, which is just completely insane. And yeah, Luke Fickell. I don't know where Luke Fickell's coaching next year, but he should be making a whole bunch of money next year for being in the spot.
And if they don't make it this year and go undefeated, this year specifically, like as stupid and crazy as this year has been, if a group of 5 can't get in there after being in the top 4 right now, then let's just go ahead and expand the playoffs, because it's never going to happen. The committee will continue to find a way to get the teams they want in there and keep the teams they don't want out. Speaking of teams that nobody wants, Tom, let's move to the Big Ten championship game. I know we could probably save that one for last, but let's save a fun one for last. Let's go with this one. Number 2, Michigan, 11-1 on the season. Number 13, Iowa, 10-2 on the season. This game, of course, as everybody knows, including now Michigan fans, is played in Indianapolis. Over under 43.5 points. Michigan favored by 10.5. First of all, I'm probably taking the under there because I don't know that Michigan will score. Well, Michigan will score maybe 31 if they're lucky. Like I that's probably about where they're topping out. And I don't see like 14 from, Iowa in that instance. Maybe a 31-13, which I'd feel bad about. But this is going to be, I don't want to say an ugly game. It's not going to be attractive. There's nothing up and down the field about it. There's going to be a lot of between the tackle stuff. We'll see some jet sweeps, so that'll be fun. The passing game from Iowa is going to be bad. The running game from Iowa is not going to be great. I wonder how well Iowa's defense will hold up over the course of a game. And maybe that just depends on how much of a fight Michigan puts up in trying to do different things. Or do they we're just going to keep it between the tackles because it worked last week. Well, Iowa's going to throw 4 linebackers on you and 4 defensive linemen, and they will actually probably force you to throw the ball. And then how do you do? And I think does it just again come back to, can Cade McNamara, like if you make Cade McNamara beat you, will he? And I'm picking Michigan here. 10.5 is a lot of points though.
Yeah, and this is one where sometimes you get the line where you combine the line and the over under, and it's like, well, Vegas thinks this game will be. The Vegas thinks this game will be number for this one is Michigan 26, Iowa 15. And Tony, I got to tell you, that feels about right. Like Iowa just kicks 5. Iowa kicks 5 field goals. Michigan kicks 4 field goals and 2 touchdowns, and it's like, that sounds horrendous and probably about right. Vegas does know, as they say. I don't think Cade McNamara, sure, go ahead and make Cade McNamara beat you. But also, I don't know who's starting for Iowa, if it's Spencer Petras or Alex Padilla. But like, go ahead and make that dude beat you, because those whoever it is the poor man's Cade McNamara. So I don't think Iowa's going to be able to run the ball the way they did last week. Or I'm sorry, Michigan's going to be able to run the ball the way they did last week, but I don't, how much do they need to do? Like someone's going to make a backbreaking turnover here, and is it Aiden Hutchinson strip sack that gets run back in for a touchdown, and like that's it, that's the only touchdown all game, or is it that Cade McNamara gets in, hits another offensive lineman in the back of the helmet and it gets picked off and run back for a touchdown? Like it feels like this is, go back to the Iowa Michigan State game, the Big Ten championship game in 2015. And it was like, it went right down. It was this really gross, low scoring 16-13 game, I think. And went right down. There's that long drive at the very end of the game that was 18 plays or something like that. And they just barely scored. And like, it just feels like we're in for another one of those just slogs where, last year's Big Ten championship game wasn't a particularly entertaining game. It was 22-10. It feels like we're in for another one of those on Saturday night.
Yeah, and the reason I wouldn't put any money on this is because I don't know if it's going to be 26-17 or 27-16. It's going to be one of those two. I'm just not sure which one it's going to be. And Michigan should head on to the playoffs then to face Oklahoma State.
Michigan needs to be rooting real hard for Georgia, because I don't think a round one Michigan Georgia or round one Michigan Alabama game would go real great for them. So yeah, there should be a lot of bulldog barking in Ann Arbor this weekend, because that could be unfortunate if they get the wrong matchup there.
So Tom, let's move to the, without question, biggest, most entertaining,
there it is,
potentially the most entertaining game of the weekend, the ACC championship game between number 15 Pittsburgh and number 16 Wake Forest. Pitt is a 3-point favorite in this one. The over under is 72.5. And I haven't looked to see what's the get in price right now for this one. It is $37. I would think that this should be a well-attended game based on the two teams who are in it, because those two teams don't expect to be in it. And there should be a ton of people there. And I know that's never the case for the ACC championship game. And it's too bad, because I think this is going to be a fun one. You've got two offenses and no defenses. And that's the kind of game you're looking for to go opposite of the Big Ten championship game. And you look at what Pitt has done. They throw the ball all over the place. Wake throws it. They score. Neither does much to stop it. Pitt has 2 losses this season, 44-41 to Western Michigan. How? Nobody knows. And 38-34 to Miami. Both of those games at home. Exactly, which makes them even worse. But Pitt has won 4 in a row. I'm going with the Panthers here. I think Wake has kind of come back to earth a little bit, or I don't even know if they've come back to earth. They are what they are, and there's only so much they can do. I think Pitt just has maybe a few more muscles, and I like Kenny Pickett in this one to lead his team. Maybe do enough to. Does he already have the Heisman invite, you think, or does he need a performance here? Because how many invitees are there even going to be this year? But I like Pickett. One of my bold predictions from Wednesday: Kenny Pickett, 6 touchdown passes. Tom, how do you see this one going?
Yeah, I don't think Kenny Pickett's got his Heisman spot locked up yet, his finalist spot. I think you've got a couple quarterbacks who are ahead of him, at least in the odds right now. And then, will they put a defensive player in there or two? So yeah, he probably needs to put on a show, which good news, you're playing just the team you want to do. You want to be playing if you want to put on a show. I feel like people are sort of figured Wake Forest out. I mean, they lost by 3 touchdowns to Clemson. They lost at North Carolina. And, Clemson's better. Everyone wrote Clemson off, and then all of a sudden they've won 10 games. And it's like, oh, well, it turns out it was a slow start. And then they're basically the not great version of Clemson, but still Clemson. They lost at North Carolina 58-55. Like, it feels like, the last Boston College only scored 10 points against them. The 3 weeks before that, they gave up 48, 42, and 58 points. Like, it feels like this is going to be very, very, very high scoring. Quite possibly both teams in the 40s, at least both teams minimally at 35, I would say. It should be fun. I guess I'm going with the Panthers. This is another one where it's like, you look at them, it's like, well, this team's entertaining but flawed, and they're both that way. Like, it should be a fun game. I don't have a ton of faith in either one of them. That's like, yes, this team is absolutely going to just show up, really deliver, fantastic game, control the game on both sides. Like, no, it's going to be, I don't know what it's going to be other than fun, but it's going to be fun.
Wake Forest, maybe one of the best stats of the year, is 2-2 this season in games where they have given up at least 42 points. So that's pretty good winning percentage when you're giving up 42 points. That's better than some teams just overall. And you even include, they've won games where they've given up 34. They've won a game where they gave up 37. So, they have no fear, and neither does Pitt. It's unfortunate that they have changed the overtime rules, because it feels like this one could go early into the early morning hours if they were to just let it go. But, we'll take 15 rounds of 2-point conversions as well. Tom, yeah, go ahead.
Well, Ohio State has once in school history, one time ever, lost a game where they scored 35 points or more once. Both teams have done it this year. Pitt did it. Pitt scored 41 against Western Michigan and lost. Wake scored 55 against North Carolina and lost. Ohio State had done it once, scoring 35. Wake Forest scored 20 more points than that and lost this year. Like, again, I don't believe in either of these teams. There's a scenario where Ohio State sees one of these teams in like the Peach Bowl or something. If Iowa wins the Rose Bowl or wins the Big Ten championship and goes to the Rose Bowl, like that might be who Ohio State gets in their bowl game. I mean, that would be well. You know what? You want to watch C.J. Stroud and Kenny Pickett just rain touchdowns on each other. Like, I mean, it would not be a particularly consequential bowl game, but man, sign me up. I'd watch that game.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking like how unenthused would the Buckeyes be, but that would be a fun one to watch as C.J. Stroud is throwing to Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Probably not to Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave at that point, but who knows? Tom, anything else before we go?
No, I think we're good. Should be a fun weekend of football and enjoy it. And then all of a sudden it's bowl season. Like after Saturday, you got Army Navy and you got bowl games. So better make the most of your last full weekend of college football before we start getting into just a few games here and there.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. We were previewing the season. Here we are getting ready for bowl season. It's the fastest time of the year, as we all know. So that will do it for this episode. I want to thank you all for joining us. As always, thank you very much, and we will talk to you all later.